that they're not tuned in, taken seriously by their governments. Governments, 88,000, as Mark said. So now let me just reiterate the central argument, which is on the final page, that a reinvention paradigm is emerging, but I say it is not bold enough. And the aim should be to temper the particularism of money interests tied to a government culture that has become too insular. That's what people are really upset about. And that isn't going to change with changes in a procedural executive branch, customer-oriented metaphors. Frankly, I don't buy the customer stuff. I've got to tell you this. I think that if you're an economist, if you're trained in public finance, you know that public goods are goods that some people want and some people don't want. So the idea that government can make everybody happy is not a correct idea. I've told this to my friend Osborne a number of times, that we can't just say happiness reigns and government is good. Anyway, he maybe will hear me someday. And that's the turnoff, I think. Now, to be honest and fair to you, I have three sort of critiques of the governmental reinvention movement on page 7, which you won't love. And I'll just say them and then I'll wind up. One is that I think if you had term limits and public financing and representative government that was more representative than the Madisonian. I mean, I'm a Madisonian. I taught for 10 years at Princeton, and he was a student at Princeton. He slept, ate, lived, and learned in Nassau Hall at Princeton. I used to lecture to all the students. There's something here. You can feel that Madisonian idea system, which is so dominant in our governmental culture. He was a brilliant theorist and absolute flop as a president, as most of you know, I'm sure. But I love him still. And so I don't think that citizen participation mechanisms are the real answer. Citizens are voters. Representatives are the people that do what we want them to do. And I really do want to empower them, but I want to also change them. Number two, I have a crack in here about performance measurement systems, which I say this to you. I'm not against it, but I sure as hell don't think it should be done from Washington. Yes, I know you have to try to get people to think harder about outcomes, but don't kid yourself. It's very, very hard. And the third thing is most controversial of all, I suppose, and that is I'm not a fan of TQM. Now you can see it all, and that is the reason TQM and leadership and pluralism really don't go together fundamentally, because what TQM is when it works well is another decision system, and we've got so many decision systems we are ossified. The dictionary definition of ossified appears in my paper. And I think there are kinds of governmental functions, like kinds of functions in the private sector, where TQM is appropriate. But it isn't appropriate for everything in government. And that's an argument I make. Now, if anybody asks you, what did Nathan say? I don't have much time. You'd probably say term limits, right? And I want to quote my favorite philosopher, two philosophers to close. One is H.L. Mencken, great bard. Mencken once said, for every problem, there's a solution that is simple, neat, and wrong. I urge you to think hard about term limits, to read and discuss term limits, but that's very central, and I'm increasingly personally coming to the view that well-designed and linked with public campaign financing, it is the kind of constitutional, bolder governmental reinvention that we should be thinking about. And a final thought is from another philosopher, American philosopher, Will Rogers. Will Rogers, thinking about people like us, I guess, or me anyway, once said, things will get better despite our efforts to improve them. I don't believe that. I think that governmental improvement is has a moment now, and I just hope we don't lose it. And I'm delighted that you're all part of it, and I'm very proud and pleased of the work of the Winter Commission, and it will be working to follow up and because I'm a member, I guess, wrestle with some of the ideas that I've shared with you at your meeting. Now, Mark, I don't know what comes next, but I turn to you to tell me. Okay, you've got a little time for questions. I wasn't sure about that because I knew there were going to be discussions. But apparently I can answer questions, but I'll be around for a while. Al?
Just within the executive branch. And in fact, the president said every place in the report where it says the president should, put the president will. And Senators Lamb and Roth and Congressman Conyers have indicated interest in working with the administration on how this legislative package to implement that. In the Winter Commission, what thoughts have you given to the next step in implementation? What role will the governor play? What role will the annual government conference play?
Those are good comments, and I'll make a quick rejoinder so other people can get the floor to react who are other than the reactors for the panel upcoming. Our job is harder because there are so many governments, and that's why we're now going to try to get out in the country and stimulate other states to have a similar process that is more specific to their state governmental structure and local governance in their state. And in the Winter Commission, we have what's called a state and local public service stress test, which we hope editorial boards will use to, say, well, we got a high stress government here because we come out bad on all these things. Paul Light, who was one of the main authors of the report, invented this. Very good idea, I think. So our job is different, and I think that's why some of our foundation sponsors want us not just to produce, but to reproduce, if you will. I'm sorry, yeah.
On your article in the Winter Commission, neither one I've studied well, but my perception is, maybe because I like them, is, all of the Senate recommendations are great and much needed and probably first priority, but I see kind of there are 15 million implementers out there, and I view TQM as a process of implementation of these, and I see kind of a lacking of, we make all these changes, but are we empowering, are we enabling these people, the 15 million, to make that change and make it successful? I've seen it work.
Well, I don't, let me stress, I don't speak for the commission on this. These are remarks that go back a long way in my own experience in writing, that if what we need is leadership that can do what people think they voted for when they voted and acted to have government that fits their values and their objectives, then I think that there is a very subtle, important question about how TQM relates to this long Louis Brownlow, Alexander Hamilton tradition of leadership in a democracy.